Good evening all, and welcome. I'm sure many of us have had horrific encounters with people we would rather not meet, especially after being in a relationship with them. These are such stories. So for now, it's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. I'm going to tell you about my first boyfriend. He was my first kiss, and also my first abusive relationship. We started dating when I was a preteen. He was super attentive and protective of me from the very beginning. It wasn't until the 5th month when I started noticing the alarms going off in my head. He had taken me on a cute roller skating date, and we had sat down for a bit to take a break when 2 of his friends showed up. At this point, the vibe from him was no longer safe. The smile he had 5 minutes beforehand was replaced with a look of pure hatred. He switched into this odd predator mode and told me to kiss him with tongue in front of his friends. I told him that I was just not ready to do something like that, and especially not in front of other people. He didn't like that answer and pulled my face to his and started forcing his tongue in my mouth. I was a pretty small girl, but luckily, I was able to push him away long enough to start running towards a more populated part of the skate rink. I told him to stay away from me while I waited for my mum to pick me up. I didn't tell my mum what happened because I was in shock and confused. I was young and didn't want to get into trouble for kissing a boy, so I decided to just ignore him until I was able to process everything. A week of successfully avoiding him at school passes when he worked up the nerve to try something again. He found me surrounded by a group of friends and decided to try his luck. I didn't even notice he was there until we were practically bumping elbows. Being that close to him definitely put me on edge, and I nearly defecate myself when he started to speak to me. It was all pointless small talk, until he realized I wasn't in the forgiving mood when his mood shifted like before, and he was just staring at me like I was the most disgusting human on the planet. I was holding one of those old portable CD players when he yanked it out my hand and started trying to shove it in his bag in an attempt to steal it. I yelled at him to give it back and tried prying it from him, which apparently took offense to him because he punched me in the face with enough force to drop me to the ground. I obviously started crying, and we were both sent to the principal's office. His dad was the football coach in that Midwestern community, so he was able to talk the principal into only requiring his son to attend detention once for punishment. We didn't see each other too much after that, and thankfully ended up going to different high schools. Then I run into him at Taco Bell drive-thru my sophomore year. I didn't realize he was the cashier until I was at the window about to pay when we made awkward eye contact. I pretended to not recognize him and hurried with the transaction until I was able to speed away. Unfortunately, he saw our chance meeting as a sign of fate and attempted to send the equivalent of "you up" to my Facebook profile. Unfortunately, I can never unsee his ultra cringy attempt at flirtation. "I think I saw you at Taco Bell today. I was the cashier. You're pretty cute, and I was wondering if you wanted to send some pics." My response was an immediate block, and I made sure to let my sister know about the incident because I just had to tell someone. If I had known then just how dangerous this teenage boy would become, I wouldn't have taken any of the incidents so lightly. But I'm not psychic, and after some awkward laughs, I moved on with my life and continued to date less rubbish people. Fast forward to today, when my sister sends me an article from her local news report featuring my dear first boyfriend's picture. Apparently, he decided to attack someone with a large weapon in the throat at a popular venue when they tried defending a woman he was physically attacking. We dated nearly 10 years ago, but I still can't shake the feeling that I definitely dodged a bullet. It's a strange feeling when you realize that dangerous people are weaving in and out of your life without you even knowing before it's too late sometimes. According to the comments in this article, he had a habit of assaulting the women in his life and had a history with obsessive stalking. I imagine justice will be served swiftly due to the manner of the crimes and overwhelming evidence supporting a case against this psychopath. I hope we never meet again. So, some context. I have never really been in a long-term relationship. I've dated a girl a bit, but I haven't dated a guy. And I've never slept with either. Like anyone else my age, a 20-year-old female might do, I started swiping on Tinder to try and put myself out there. I like to think I'm not naive and pretty intuitive about people, but I wasn't perceptive about this guy at all. Jake and I swiped and matched each other 2 days ago. Jake's first message was telling me that he wanted to meet me and my dog, and he thought we were both cute. Liking his directness, I said we should meet up. The night the first red flag waved was when I didn't answer him back immediately, and he messaged me, asking if he was detecting negativity. Chalking it up to nervousness, I apologized and explained why I didn't answer, and all was good. Then we planned to meet up last night at the bar. Flag number 2 was when I arrived at the bar. It's important to note, in this state I live in, any place selling liquor can't let anyone under 21 in. I didn't know this, and had been reassured by Jake that I could get in no problem. Of course this wasn't true. Luckily, seeing my birthday was just in a week, the bouncer let me in anyway, and within minutes Jake was at the bar too. Meeting this guy, he seemed normal. Red leather jacket, chucks, typical normal dude. He orders me a gin and tonic and one for himself, and we settle in and talk. He tells me about his life. He's rich, and his family and I do the same. We play pool at one point, so I put down my drink, and this is when things start to get a little bit blurry. I can't remember most of our conversation up until we happened to get back to my place. I remember us leaving, getting into his car, and us getting near to my place. You have to understand I don't drink much, but one drink does not get me drunk. I don't do hangovers, and I barely ever brown out. I never black out. This is important to note. Once in my town, we decide to go to a nearby market to pick up food. As we are there, red flag 3 occurs. Seeing someone I thought I knew, I told Jake I was going to say hi. He awkwardly backed away, and he stood outside at this point, awkwardly backing away and refusing to meet her. I was wrong though, I didn't know the girl, and soon rejoined him to walk to my place. As we open the door, my roommate Maddie opens the door. We say hi, talk a little, and she mentions she's about to take a shower. Jake at this point creepily makes a "ooh" sound. Maddie, who is also tipsy at this point, mentions some guy wants to do me. No biggie, it's the way she rolls. But after his expression and the realization of how tired I was and how drunk, I say he should go. And he does with no attempt at any physical contact. This is where the story should end, but it doesn't. Within minutes, this dude blows up my phone with messages, saying he's more open-minded like my roommate, calling me boring, implying I'm not attracted to guys, and saying that he felt no chemistry and he hoped we could have cuddled at least. I showed my roommate, who gasped. Me not getting the full meaning of the open-minded context, remember I'm drunk, and ask why he's so shocked. Finally I get it. He's implying he wants to sleep with her, and that she is more open to it than I am. Just so creepy. At that point I'm freaking out, slowly realizing how I'm acting and feeling. Putting together how one drink shouldn't make me feel this way, I realize I might have been slipped something. Maddie and I go to the local police. We report it, and I decide not to get tested. I couldn't explain why. But until you're in my position, possibly drugged at 3 a.m, embarrassed and worried you're wrong, worried you might be charged for underage drinking, It's a lot harder than it looks to go through the whole process. The story ends like this. He's blocked, I'm terrified because he knows where I lived, and with me sleeping off whatever was in my body. Jack, please don't do that to a girl again, and let's never meet. You're so gross. Up until junior year of high school, I flew mostly under the social radar and stuck to my status as a nerd girl. But when I was 15, I joined varsity cheer. My school's cheerleaders weren't popular by definition, but everyone kind of knew who they were because we were on the announcements, performed at pep rallies, and generally engaged with the students a lot. I made a lot of friends that year, and some of them happened to be the cool kids. For a while, I thought this was my long-awaited karma payoff for the years of bullying I'd suffered at their hands. I even developed a crush on one of them. A crush which the junior cheer captain volunteered herself to help me pursue. Homecoming is a big deal where I'm from, and I began to fantasize about my crush asking me to go with him. I'd heard rumors he was planning a dramatic proposal as homecoming season approached. I'd become more and more sure I would be his date, and the junior cheer captain who was close with him kept dropping hints that I was right. One day at practice, she asked me what my favorite candy was, and I knew it would be so my crush would know what to give me. You can imagine my surprise when after an exhausting theatre rehearsal, I walked into the parking lot and was confronted by a guy I hardly spoken to asking me to be his date. My theatre friends all applauded, assuming I was overjoyed. I saw both my parents in the parking lot recording the whole surprise, but most importantly, the cool kids I'd recently befriended were standing right there behind him, egging him on. I didn't understand why, because he wasn't popular at all. In fact, he was known to be kind of a creep. The junior cheer captain was laughing, encouraging him to give me the box of my favorite candy he was holding. She definitely orchestrated the whole thing. I didn't really know the guy, but I didn't want to humiliate him in front of the coolest kids in school, so I faked a smile and rolled with it, and promised myself I'd deny him later in private so he wouldn't be embarrassed. Afterwards, when my parents excitedly asked me how I felt about the ordeal, I explained how uncomfortable it made me. I said that I got super creepy vibes from the guy. That didn't fly with my parents. My mother accused me of having expectations too high, and my father demanded to know, not for the first time, if I was secretly a lesbian. I had never had a boyfriend or shown much interest in dating. To make his case stronger, I'd just become best friends with the only openly gay girl our school had ever seen. Long story short, I knew that if I shut down my date, I'd effectively declare war on my parents. However, I played my dad's protective instinct against him and persuaded him to let me friend-zone my date. After all, he knows how high school boys can think, right? I texted my date that night and explained that I only saw us as friends, but would still be happy to go to homecoming with him. He was very polite about it, although I could tell he was interested in me romantically. It seemed we'd reached a deal until the next day at school, when one of my cheerleader friends referred to my date as my boyfriend. I corrected her and told her we're just going to homecoming as friends. She seemed confused and told me my date was telling anyone who would listen that I was his girlfriend. A few more of my friends approached me with similar comments, and I confronted my date about them. He denied all involvement and suggested it was just a rumor. I reminded him that we were just friends, and I had zero romantic interest in him. He said he understood. I got a call from the junior cheer captain. She pretended to be sweet and conspiratorial, but I was still annoyed that she'd led me to believe my crush would ask me to homecoming. She began her attempt to persuade me that I was wrong to friend-zone my date. She said that she'd spent many afternoons planning his proposal with him, and she knew he was kind of creepy from afar, but was sweet and caring underneath it all. I said, if he was such a catch, she should date him. Annoyed, she dropped the sweet act. She told me I had to date him because he'd liked me so much and he'd gone to so much trouble to ask me for homecoming. I had to give him a chance because he had gone out on a limb for me. I told her she was wrong. I didn't have to do anything, and I didn't want to, and I owed him nothing. I ended up hanging up on her soon after, but that was just the beginning. Starting the next Monday, he would corner me in the hallway and give me a rose held in his teeth. He usually did so between my 6th and 7th period, when my path through the hall crossed his. I was deeply uncomfortable with this and told him so, but he wouldn't stop. I took different routes to escape him, but the junior cheer captain and her posse made a point of tracking me down so that he could find me everywhere. Every time he did this, everyone in the area would treat it as a sweet romantic gesture, despite my obvious discomfort. Wouldn't any girl be lucky to have a boy so devoted to give her a rose every day? He was still telling everyone I was his girlfriend. The final straw for me was when he walked into a class he wasn't in to find me and give me my daily rose. My teacher, who was friends with the junior cheer captain, let this happen. For weeks afterwards, she would ask me about my date every day. When he came in, I told him to get out and leave me alone. His feelings were clearly hurt, and he left, looking like a kicked puppy. My classmates had started calling me a cold, hard so-and-so. It didn't matter what I had to say about him. I was an ice queen refusing his sweet advances. Everyone in the school had decided that I was in love with him, and nobody cared what I had to say about it. My crush, who was part of the popular group, joined the junior cheer captain in persuading me to return my date's feelings. At every event where the cheerleaders were present, my date would push his way in front of the crowd and would go to great lengths to get my attention. At football games, he would have a flag in the student section so I'd look at him where we were cheering. The other girls would make comments on how endearing he was when he waited in the parking lot by our bus back to the school, just to hug me and tell me how great I did. I didn't know what else to do other than let it happen. I had only recently ascended to a position of visibility. If I conflicted too hard with the cool kids who were so dead set on setting me up with this guy, I could be an outsider all over again. I just kept ranting to my real friends about how creepy he was and publicly let him do what he wanted. It would all blow over. My school had a 15-second attention span, so some scandal had to one-up me sooner or later. The truth emerged, as usual, in the locker room. It turns out the junior cheer captain had been telling him during their afternoons together that I was into him. He'd come to her for help announcing his crush on me. And she'd gone a step further and convinced him I felt the same, despite the fact I didn't even know his name. She'd lied to him for weeks prior to the homecoming proposal, and when I told her that she was wrong, she didn't care. She told me I should be grateful because everyone was starting to think I was gay. My best friend, the lesbian who was starting a gay revolution, and I inspired and spread a rumor that we were dating. After all, everyone already thought I was gay, right? But my date wasn't fazed. In fact, he told everyone that he'd just turned me straight again. What? 3 weeks after he asked me, it was finally homecoming night. Thanks to cheer obligations and a complete coincidence involving a switched backpack that left me without my dress, I ended up only attending the dance for half an hour. My date awkwardly stood on the side of the room while I danced my heart out to Mr. Brightside. I almost felt bad for him. Right at the end, the junior cheer captain appeared like a summoned demon to suggest we slow dance at the next opportunity. Thank God I escaped that one by walking to the DJ and suggesting he play Footloose. My date walked me to the parking lot to wait for my mum to pick me up. While we waited for her to drive around, which took entirely too long because she'd still hoped I'd stop making a fuss and date him, he asked me out, to which I politely declined. He quickly stammered that we could go with a group of people, like the junior cheer captain and my crush. I denied him again, and made it very clear that we were only friends. and I wasn't interested in romantic endeavors because I was too busy. That was actually true. I was in all advanced classes, varsity theatre and cheer, and worked part-time. A few days later, a teacher eloped to Vegas, and nobody cared about my love life anymore. My date and I were distanced again by classes and activities and work. It appeared that everything was going back to normal. And that Friday at the football game, my crush asked me to sit on his shoulder for the alma mater. Kind of a romantic thing at the school. Overjoyed, I accepted, and I hoped this would be the beginning of a new chapter for me. I ignored the frantically waving flag in the stands. Monday, my date stood on a chair in his second period class and announced that everyone should be wary of my crush because he would steal your girl. I heard everyone buzzing about it a few hours later when someone called me something horrible for breaking my date's heart. I knew I was being dramatic, but I decided not to get lunch that day, afraid of running into him. I'm so glad I didn't. Later I saw on Snapchat that my date had carved my name into his arm with a pair of scissors. His bleeding arm was screenshotted and sent to me by half a dozen people, most of them demanding why I'd hurt him like this. He did it into the middle of lunch in a crowded cafeteria, and somehow no administration either noticed or cared. The school was buzzing. My date was a broken-hearted victim, and I was the evil, secretly gay, awful girl who wouldn't give him a chance. I got so many dirty looks. By fifth period, I was just ready to walk out, but my good girl instincts kicked in, and I decided to tough it out for 2 more hours. Around that time, I got a panicked text from one of my cheer friends. While she'd initially been insistent that I date the creepy guy, she'd apparently changed her mind after the lunch incident earlier. She told me that my date, who was in her 5th period class, was going off the rails. He had started out saying that he wanted to end his own life because I wouldn't love him, and this had escalated to saying that he would end my crush for lying to me and stealing me away. Finally, he started talking about how he knew where I lived. My parents had initially given him my address when he initially wanted to ask me to the dance at my house, and he would make me pay for wrongdoing him. I knew that after 6th period, our paths would cross the hall. Since the beginning of this ordeal, the school had cracked down on students getting outside, and my alternate route to escape him was no longer an option. My class was at the far end of the hall with nowhere to go in this central hub, and he would be coming from the other end of the hallway towards mine. I was stuck up a chimney, basically. Desperate, I messaged the junior cheer captain to finish what she started and tell him that I was not interested, had never been interested in him at all, and she'd made this mess, and I would make sure she had to clean it up. She said she'd go to the counselor, but she didn't know what else to do, as this was now way beyond her control. For the first time, and only time, I skipped class. I hid out in the theatre hall and waited for 7th period. I got a few messages during the passing period that my date was waiting for me by the bathrooms. There was a little alcove right where you can't see people coming around the corner, and the thought of him hiding there and waiting for me to walk by alone horrified me. Right before 7th period began, a few of my classmates burst in, cackling and proclaiming that my date was coming down the hall to finish the life of my crush. They thought this was hilarious. Judging by the look on my crush's face, this wasn't a joke to him anymore. Our teachers brushed it off as typical theatre drama, pun fully intended. And I watched the clock and tried not to cry, knowing that by the time the bell rang, my date would be outside, waiting for me and my crush to emerge. That day ended up being a work day, so my crush and I were able to escape the classroom and hide outside elsewhere in the theatre hall to get away from him. He opted for the black box theatre, and I went for the lighting closet. Obviously, I didn't witness what happened, but my best friend filled me in afterwards. Allegedly, my date had turned up 3 minutes before the bell rang and stood outside the classroom where we couldn't see him. When we opened the door, he told everyone standing around that he was ready to have a fight with my crush, and apparently, he had a weapon. We didn't know if this was true or not, but the idea that he might terrified me. His arm was wrapped in paper towels that he was bleeding through. My best friend told him my crush and I were gone, but he didn't believe her, and he stood outside for 25 minutes until the administrators began walking through to make sure no one was still in the school who shouldn't be. My date wasn't in theatre, so he wasn't allowed to stick around. That night, I messaged him. Not only would I never date him, but could no longer even see a friendship between us. I sent him a number to a hotline and told him to get help. Finally, I told him he needed to learn what no meant, and I never wanted to speak to him again. He responded that he was sorry and asked if there was anything he could do to fix this. I told him no. I don't think he learned the meaning of the word after all, because the same pattern repeated itself a few months later down the line on Valentine's Day, and the next year at homecoming, senior year Valentine's Day, and prom. But these are other stories. I've since graduated and gone off to college hundreds of miles away from him. My family back home moved from the address my parents gave him, and contrary to popular belief, I'm not gay. My crush, on the other hand, came out a few months later, and we were friends for the rest of high school. I'm working on handling romantic endeavors in a healthy way, but he got in my head. He was the first person to ever show an interest in me. Ironically, the last time I saw him was my first and only homecoming game after graduating. But this time, I had true friends to defend me when he predictably tried to pull some weird stuff. The worst part looking back was somehow being at fault for everything. To this day, people from my high school reference the whole ordeal as that time you wouldn't date that poor shy kid. I can't even appreciate red roses anymore. Let me start by stating I'm a 24-year-old female and downloaded Tinder to see what it was all about. I didn't put too much into it though. I never took it seriously. I never take much seriously. Most of the things I do are for a laugh. I think I tend to forget that the internet is not a game and that there are real-life people behind that screen. I get on the bus back home after a long day of running errands. I sit down and from the corner of my eye, notice a heavy-set man staring at me. I'm used to being stared at, so I ignore him. Also note, my Tinder account has been officially terminated months ago. I sneeze, he says bless you, and I say thank you. He was a heavy-set guy with full hair, green eyes, and an olive complexion. He then hands me a tissue. It's clean, don't worry. And then he gives me a piece of gum, 5 gum to be exact. I say thank you and throw it in my backpack. 1 mile, he says. Based on how he speaks, I think he might be a little on the special side. His voice was slow and low. Huh? 1 mile. That was on your Tinder. It said you were 1 mile away. I recognize you. We spoke for a bit. Then you stopped chatting. He then gives me one of those chocolate balls that are wrapped in all fancy like red. I then nervously giggled and told him I deleted my account. To be honest, I didn't even remember chatting with him. I would just swipe right on any and everybody. He asked me repeatedly for my number, and I gave it to him because I'm really bad at rejecting people in person. He immediately called me to confirm it was my number, and at this point I got off at a different bus stop, close to home but not too close, and sped walked home. I threw away his candies, blocked his number, and I really hope it was just a coincidence, and that he wasn't trying to find me. Last month I moved to another country where I didn't know nearly anyone. Due to that, I spent a lot of time alone and got bored. Although I didn't and don't like the concept of Tinder, I decided to create an account to meet people and spent hours swiping left and right and having brief conversations with my matches. However, most of them were men that wanted to see me on that same day, which scared me a bit. Our story begins when I matched with a 30-year-old girl who didn't wait too long to send me a hi nor ask me for a phone number. I, who have never used the app before, thought it was normal and gave my phone number to her without having spoken at all. That was my first mistake. At first, everything seemed normal. The girl was called Diana and sent me voice notes. We spoke briefly and in a superficial way about ourselves. She seemed very interested in talking to me, since on several occasions she would double text me when I didn't answer quickly. And I'm not gonna lie, I found that curious. However, I paid it no mind. The second day of speaking to her, she asked me to meet her somewhere. And even though our conversations had been very superficial, I agreed and we set a place in an hour. But before we met, I regretted it. I deleted Tinder, messaged her an apology, and that was where things got weird. She let me know it was fine, but a few minutes later sent me several messages and deleted them within a second so I couldn't read them. A few hours later, she tried video calling me. I didn't answer and told her I was busy. In despite to that, she called me again, and I kept saying I was busy, but she didn't stop until about 2 a.m. By that time, she was either drunk, and I blocked her. She called me twice at 2 a.m. By that time, I was out and drunk and blocked her. I felt a little bad about it, but come on, I'm a woman in her early 20s living in a foreign country. So at the same time, I felt relief that it was over. Except that it wasn't. I wake up to a hello from an unknown number, which profile picture in WhatsApp was one of an old man. I asked him who he was, and in less than a minute received a reply saying it's Diana, that it's her dad's number. Why did I block her, and if I annoyed her? In spite of how bizarre that was, I tried to emphasize with her and answered with truth, and she told me it was fine, and I blocked her dad's number. In less than 2 hours, I got another message from another unknown number. It was Diana again, asking why I kept blocking her and that she needed to talk to me. At this point, it was no longer funny. I told her I'm not interested in talking to her, and she literally says, I need to tell you something. There's a girl who's harassing me. She does black magic. I repeated that I'm not interested, and she goes on like, you don't believe me, don't you? And I block her again for a third time. I don't really know if this was some kind of strange joke, but I think I can say that my first experience using Tinder was tragic. I wonder if it's always this way, though I've never really thought about downloading it again. At least I know that next time I shouldn't share my phone number with someone I haven't spoken to. Let's hope for the best. I never meet you, Diana. This happened to me my freshman year of college. Tinder was new, and everyone at my university was on the app. I joined to see what all the fuss was about. Looking through profiles, I found a few guys that were really interesting, and this one guy in particular caught my eye, Walter. I swiped right on Walter, and we matched. I was excited and kind of giddy because he was super attractive. He messaged me and I got butterflies in my stomach. We messaged on the app for maybe an hour. Typical conversation is happening. And I asked him what he did for a living. He asked what my major was. Harmless conversation. After a while, he asked for my number so we could text each other instead of message on the app. I gave it to him and he seemed nice enough. We messaged back and forth for a few days. Lots of flirty conversation and plans to hang out finally occurred. By the 4th day of conversation, he started calling me babe, which gave me mixed feelings. It was cute, but also a little weird. We didn't really know each other and had never met. I ignored it and continued on with the conversation. He started saying he wanted to be exclusive and he really wanted to see me in person. He was begging me at this point to come to his apartment to cuddle and watch movies with him and his dog. I told him that we would need to meet in public first. I would not be going to some stranger's apartment, and he said I was overreacting and kept begging. I ignored him for the rest of the night. The next day, he apologized and said he misunderstood. We needed to meet in public, so we made plans for that weekend. The weekend came faster than expected. and it was the day we were supposed to meet. Something just felt off, and I decided to back out. I texted him apologizing, saying my mum wasn't feeling well and I needed to go home to help her with some housing chores. This made him annoyed, and he said, "Your mum is a big girl. If she needs, she can call you. Just come over and you can leave whenever you go help. I really want to see you and kiss you." I told him no, that I would be staying with my mum that weekend, and that was that. I only lived half an hour away from home, so I actually did go home and see my mum that day. And after what he texted me about my mum, I began ignoring him, and the texts started rolling in. Text after text. "Babe, I'm sorry. Babe, come over. Babe, I miss you. You gonna come over?" I planned on replying the next day that I was busy with my mum. Then he began calling me. I had a total of 45 missed phone calls within a 2-hour period. He left voicemails saying he was sorry and he just missed me and wanted me to call him back. Similar voicemails continued almost the entire time I was home. My roommate texted me shortly after I finished dinner with my mum and asked if we could go out that night. I agreed and went back to my university dorm. Suddenly, the calls from Walter started to increase again. More texts, voicemails, and he started messaging me again on Tinder asking why I wasn't replying to him. I wasn't planning on replying until I got a message on Instagram that said, "Why didn't you tell me you were coming back to town tonight?" Getting this message really freaked me out. I replied to him saying I was sorry that I'd been busy with my mum. "How did you know I was back in town?" He said, "I checked your Tinder, of course." Tinder doesn't tell exact locations, but it has a within 1 mile message. This really freaked me out, and I began messaging him back and said that he was being really creepy. He seriously had to be constantly refreshing my profile to see the distance change. The messages, calls, and voicemails continued. All were him now apologizing for making me feel weird about him knowing where I was. He was just worried about me. We had been texting for less than a week, and I told my roommate about it, and we decided to stay in that night. The last straw for me was getting a message saying, "Look, I'm sorry. I'm outside your dorm with flowers and chocolate. Please forgive me." Ah, hell no. I called campus security and told them about this guy, and they never found anyone waiting outside any of the doors. I assumed he was in his car waiting for me to reply. I blocked him on all socials, phone number, deleted Tinder, and have never been back on since. I've seen him once out and about the town, but he never recognized me, thankfully. Walter, if you ever hear this, I'm glad we never met. Thank you for making me second guess every single attractive guy I find. In September of 2018, I met this guy, Andrew, through a mutual friend on her birthday. Andrew had taken an interest in me immediately, but I was kind of clueless until several of my friends said so. He began texting me a lot, and we were eventually starting to hanging out on our own. A few weeks passed by, and we started dating, and that's when things get weird. Whenever I would hang out with my friends, he'd get passive-aggressive about me not spending time with him instead. One weekend, I had seen him almost every day that week, and on Friday morning we had plans to hang out as well, but I was feeling sick, so cancelled. Later that night I had a Halloween party and was feeling better, so opted to go. He got annoyed at me, saying I never wanted to spend any time with him and whatnot. Other weird things were happening, but in the end I told him I wanted to end things via text. He didn't take it well. He constantly would messaging me asking if we could meet up in person to talk, at the park, no less, and I kept saying I thought it would be best that we didn't. Then he asked my friends for my class schedule, as I was in a junior college. They obviously didn't give it to him because they knew that he was weird and of everything that was going on. I had to skip one of my classes the next day to make my schedule for the next semester, and when I got home, my friend had told me he went to that same class. My friend didn't give him my schedule. He had went on the website where we make schedules, looked up the classes that he remembered me mentioning I was taking, and went to that classroom to basically force me into talking to him. I've never been so grateful to have skipped a class. Even after that, he still tried talking to me until I eventually blocked him on everything. You're a character, Andrew, but you scared me, so let's not meet again. Hey guys, it's Mort here and thank you so much for listening. I've never seen, used or downloaded Tinder in my life, but from these stories, I'm pretty sure it's not the best place. I'm joking. I bet lots of friendships or relationships can actually come from the app. Just, you have to wade through all the awful ones as well, which is a shame. But there you go. I suppose it'll be the same in real life. You just never know who people are under the surface. So, cautionary tales to you all. Be careful who you meet and always meet in public places, as things can get sticky if you don't, as I recall from a few other crazy ex stories that we've read in the past. As always, a huge thank you to my lovely patrons whose help and support dedicated to the channel means a lot. By contributing a small amount of money every month, you help keep the channel running, and obviously it means a lot. You get some cool perks for signing up, as well as other stuff if you check out the other tiers. It really does mean a lot, so thank you. I hope you are enjoying the stories. Please don't forget that we have new ones every night. I have a question for you. I'm thinking of doing crazy exes in the next 2-3 weeks. I try and keep them, try and keep story topics to once a month. But these ones are going to be a little bit different. Just let me know if you're interested. And if so, I'll be releasing them in about 2-3 weeks. I've got a really fun idea for it. Let me know. Alright guys, well for now I'm going to sign off. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.